We accept the reality of the world with which we're presented. It's as simple as that.
We no longer live in a world of nations and ideologies, Mr. Beale. The world is a business, Mr. Beale.
Go on without me. Just go.
A good soldier never leaves a man behind.
Because I wouldn't give you 2 cents for all your fancy rules if behind them they didn't have a little bit of plain, ordinary, everyday kindness.
Life, finds a way.
Welcome back to Silver Screen Biases, Episode 2. My name's Nelson, here's my Droog, Jeff.
That's right, here's Jeff. I am here, I made it. We've made it through.
Made it through.
In the past 2 movies, this was definitely the hardest one.
That's right. This week we're talking about Stanley Kubrick's A Clockwork Orange. What year was that made?
1971.
1971.
Yes.
So, taking a real quick look at Rotten Tomatoes score, IMDb. So the Rotten Tomato critic score, 88%, and the audience score is 93%.
Man, I had so many questions for that audience.
Yeah, no kidding. And in the IMDb Top 250, it's ranked 102nd. So still in the top half.
Almost the top 100. That's mind-blowing.
Yeah.
So many thoughts, Nelson.
I think
so
a
many
big part of why the audience score is so high and why it's ranked so high in the IMDb Top 250 is that Kubrick fans, after I don't know which one of his movies it was, but there was a certain movie that after that he developed a cult following.
Yeah.
And so they would pick apart his movies, trying to find all the hidden meaning and stuff. So I think for this one, it's a lot more cult following than quality.
Right. I mean, just 3 years before this movie was 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Yeah, and that was a big one for him.
Huge. And I believe that one's on our list.
Oh, yeah.
And we will inevitably review it at some point.
That's right.
That one is, spoiler alert, that one's number 90.
Yeah.
On the 250. So we will probably get into that movie eventually.
Yeah.
But and I guess this was my first movie of watching Kubrick movies.
Mine as well.
So I can't even tell you if I can understand why people coming from that movie going to A Clockwork Orange would have been on the fence. So maybe Space Odyssey is even better or even worse. I don't know.
So of his really well-known movies,
yeah,
this is the one that when I was telling people, yeah, I watched A Clockwork Orange, the response was, ooh, and not my favorite Kubrick film. That's the 2 responses I got.
Well, I have hope then for the other ones.
Yeah.
I don't know if A Full Metal Jacket's on.
It is.
It is?
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Several of his movies.
Fantastic.
In fact, I think I went through it. Half of his movies made it to the IMDb Top 250.
All right. So this is one of many we will be discussing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Budget for this movie. So we mentioned last episode that Hitchcock's budget was $1 million.
Yep.
And here we are a little over a decade later.
11 years.
11 years later. Budget of $1.3 million. With inflation, that comes out to around 9.5 in today's money.
2022? Okay.
In today's funny money.
Okay. So it's still not much for a movie comparatively.
That's right.
Still small budget.
Yeah. Production history. You got any notes for me?
Not so much production. I have the notes that I was able to find, and my wife watched half of the movie with me. So
the first half or second half?
The first half. And the more notes that I came prepared with today was more stuff post movie and post release.
Okay.
Stuff about the author, and his thoughts, and I think that'll probably be best suited for later in our conversation. Okay. But for history stuff, with it being European, being just I didn't have much. I didn't come up with much. Yeah. But I do have thoughts post-production and post-release about just the effect it had on viewership and stuff.
Okay.
So that's right. But yeah, history, and honestly, I couldn't tell you what was going on in Europe in 1971.
So I did a little digging because the book was written almost, I think, mid-60s.
Okay.
And from the mid-50s through till even Kubrick's production of this, adolescent crime and violence was on the rise. So this would have been something on not just the author's mind, but everybody's mind. The dialogue in it, the language, he made his own slang. It's based off of Russian slang and Cockney British rhyming slang. So I don't know about you, but I had to watch it with subtitles. I could not follow the movie.
Yeah, the subtitles for that, like I did, and I'm not even sure that helped.
I'm a big subtitles guy regardless, but like I couldn't have followed this one.
I agree. No, I didn't have the story, the general movement of the movie and the progression of the main character. I had no problem following how he got to that point. Like I followed the pieces, but the broader picture, it took me a while to decipher what I thought was being laid down.
Yeah.
And stuff, because this is probably just a little bit about Jeff here. This is probably the roughest movie I've ever watched to date.
Oh, me too. It was hard to watch.
Just graphically, I mean, I've watched movies with languages and like foul languages, so the language didn't bother me. I've watched violence, but just the graphic rape scenes.
Yeah. And weirdly enough, Kubrick held back from what was in the book.
So like this was that it was difficult, and I wanted to finish it. Like I almost called you, Nelson. I was like, dude, I don't know if I can finish this movie.
Honestly, after the first 15 minutes, I texted you. I said, I finished 15 minutes. That was rough. And I was thinking the same thing. I was like, let's do a different movie.
So I did watch this in a matter of 2 days.
Yeah.
But I'm glad I finished it so I can have a formulated opinion about it.
Sure.
And I have some things we can get to as we conclude this episode. I can get to what I think could be some positive takeaways, because I'm an optimist.
Yeah.
But it was rough, and overall, I did not enjoy it.
Yeah. I have mostly negative takeaways, but I really look forward to it. So I watched it once. I broke it up into 2 viewings over the course of a single day.
Yep.
I let myself kind of sit on it, digest it a bit, came back and watched it again 2 days later. You watched it
a second time.
Yeah.
Nelson.
The graphicness of the first 15 minutes really is only like the first time you watch it. It just does not hit the same way the second time.
Okay.
Which I found really interesting. But man, the first time was that unsettling.
It's very unsettling. Yeah. And even from a production standpoint, I've never made a movie. I've never been a part of the production of a film like that, or a film at any point.
The consent papers for this must have been wild.
But at one point, how can you be comfortable sitting behind a camera watching that?
Yeah. And how many takes?
Yep, do it again. The sped up orgy scene.
Yeah.
Where it's him and the 2 females.
Yeah.
That scene was filmed in a 28-minute one-cut filming.
Yeah.
It's just
and
I don't know. It's a whole different world out there.
A quick note on that: I mentioned that it's less grotesque than the book. I didn't read the book. Don't intend to.
I didn't. Yeah,
won't be reading that.
Touch the book.
But I do know that scene in the book, it's not 2 consenting teenagers that join him. It's 2 11-year-olds that he rapes.
No.
Yeah, it is grotesque. Author wrote the book in the span of about 2 weeks. Just sat down.
What was he going through in those 2 weeks?
I don't know. And the weirder thing, he was a known author. This was his breakout hit. The movie specifically bumped him up. But until this point, all of his writing was comedy. So much about this just doesn't make sense, right? There's some deep evil in people.
Yeah. Anthony Burgess.
Yeah. He was a comedy writer before this, and mostly after this as well.
Yeah. A satirical black comedy novel.
Yeah. Now, I would say that
published in 1962.
Yeah. 1962. Okay, yeah. So early 60s.
192 pages. It's not real huge.
No. Not a whole lot of differences between page and film either.
So this is a good part. Okay, so my wife is a teacher.
Yeah.
And she is a teacher. She is a teacher specifically in the English department of a high school. Mm-hmm. And so after watching the first half of it before we went to bed, she went to school the next day and talked to her English teachers about, what their thoughts, had they heard it, how they read of it, what they think of it.
Right.
And none of them had read it, but a lot of them were like, okay, now that someone's kind of started the conversation, now that they were all intrigued. So they all went to their own different sources and stuff. And one of Lindsay's teachers came up with this quote from the author.
Okay.
And this is referring to post-production and post-release of the movie.
Right.
Okay, so this is the author. The book I am best known for, or only known for, is a novel I am prepared to repudiate, written a quarter of a century ago. A jeu d'esprit knocked off for money in 3 weeks. It became known as the raw material for a film which seemed to glorify sex and violence. The film made it easy for readers of the book to misunderstand what it was about, and the misunderstanding will pursue me until I die. The last chapter of the book, wherein Alex on his own decides to give up violence and become an upstanding citizen, was not published in the U.S. because publishers thought the American audiences would not like a redemptive ending. So it wasn't the author that kiboshed that last chapter. It was the American publishers that said, no, us Americans, we don't want redemption. We want that raw, mysterious, ambiguity of an ending.
Yeah.
And the author is not whenever that quote was taken,
Right.
has not been happy with the way that the book to film
Was received.
And I guess maybe in general we can just, is Stanley Kubrick an American? I should know this.
Know.
Okay, I'll look that up. But just maybe in general, just how the author Anthony Burgess's work has been received in America in general.
Find out.
I'll look that up.
When
right
you look
now.
that up, also look up when the American version was released, because I bet it predates the movie, because the movie didn't come out for 10 years after the book. I think that the movie is a lot better for leaving that ambiguity. I don't think that a full redemption would be. I don't think the full redemption is necessary for the main theme of the movie to come across, and I don't think that the story's better off for having it. In fact, I think the book, the movie feels very real, and a lot of that comes from my political bias. We've discussed our religious biases. We're both Christians, both grew up in church.
Yes,
but our political biases are not. Well, mine certainly isn't very common among Christians. Do you want to discuss yours first? Actually, do you have...
I do. So real quick, before we get into our little political history of Nelson and I, John Anthony Burgess Wilson, born on February 25th, 1917, died November 1993, was an English writer. So he was from England. So
okay. And Kubrick?
Stanley Kubrick, born 1928, was an American film director, producer, screenwriter, and photographer. So it was an American producer, director making an English piece of art.
Right. And was the American edition of the book already out by this point? I have to imagine it would have been. It's almost 10 years later.
Works.
11 years later.
I'm looking up the works now. This is Wikipedia, by the way.
Sure.
So take it for what it is.
An infallible resource.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Burgess had written A Clockwork Orange with 21 chapters. And I don't know if this is the English version or the British. So I'm assuming this is the English version.
The British version, yeah.
Meaning to match the age of maturity. 21 is the symbol of human maturity, or it used to be, since at 21 you got to vote and assumed adult responsibility. So it was an intentional length of...
Yeah.
Or it was intentional sectioning
Right.
of his book to make 21 chapters. I cannot find anything in here about separate published releasings.
Okay. That's fine.
So to our understanding, it may have been released at the same time, just two different versions.
Or slightly delayed.
Slightly delayed, yeah.
Yeah, I can't imagine it didn't come out till after the movie.
Yeah. But politics.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Tell us about your politics, Jeff.
I do not adhere to any specific political party. I think there are issues with both the major Democratic and Republican. I have issues with both.
Yeah.
So I don't adhere to one more than the other. I would say I was raised more conservative not just within my Christian faith, but just within life in general. I have more of a conservative worldview, but with that being said, there are some things within the Republican side that I completely disagree with,
Sure.
and stuff. So,
I got a long list.
yeah, but and then on the Democratic side too, there are some things that I actually agree with that a lot of people that a lot of family members or things that I was raised to believe have now grown to have a changed perspective. So like I don't like the idea of parties.
Yeah.
In general, and I for me, like if there is parties, I'd rather there be more parties at equal playing field rather than just two. But that's that could be a whole nother podcast.
And parties ends up being like sports, except the team that wins gets to decide how the other people get to live their lives.
Right. Like one just ends up being the antithesis of the other.
Yeah.
But it's not actually like that. Like just because
they have far more in common than
right.
they do.
They're not opposite. They're not polar opposites.
No.
And so I wish there was more options. So I'm actually what I like more than politics is I like history.
Yeah.
Specifically, I love learning about American history. So I'm going through just kind of a personal journey. I'm reading through all of the U.S. presidents' biographies chronologically. So I'm still in the Revolution area. I just finished.
Who are you on right now?
I just finished John Quincy Adams.
Okay.
The date of recording this,
you're still in the Founding Fathers.
Yeah. The cool thing about John Quincy, if I can just 2 minutes on this, he worked for George Washington, but then also got to have a hand in helping guide the Lincoln administration. So John Quincy had his feet in both sides of the Revolution and the Civil War. And I just think, and like, there's a lot of things you could go in detail with that, but like from Washington to Lincoln, Quincy Adams was there for both.
That's
for
wild.
Parts of both. And I didn't know that. And Quincy was very adamant about the abolition of slavery, maybe even more so than Lincoln was at the forefront.
Yeah.
And again, that's a whole other podcast.
I've got a lot to say about Lincoln and slavery.
But yeah, so I love history. So like, I love learning about where we came from and trying to not repeat the bad things and trying to improve on the good things. So with that, politically, I feel like we can do better. We are a super young country and we've got a lot to learn. And I feel like we need more options than just two parties. That's my political perspective in a nutshell.
Yeah.
What about yourself, Nelson?
Well, so I grew up in a more conservative household. I got very political in high school. I thought that I was leaning more Democrat in high school, but that was mostly just because of the media I was consuming.
Yeah.
Right. That was at the height of the Colbert Report and the Daily Show, and I really resonated with their message.
I admire both of them.
Yeah.
I like the best journalists. I like both of them.
That was both of their best work.
Okay. I don't think they've downgraded at all. I just feel like their platforms got minimized.
I strongly think that what they're doing now is disappointing.
Okay.
Compared to what they've done previously. But I after high school, I realized that my political beliefs and my religious beliefs were coming in conflict a lot. And so I decided that I was going to take a break from politics, which for me at the time was a big deal. I was very political. And so I took several years off and really developed my religious convictions and understanding, which are still in development.
Yeah, I feel if you ever get to a point where you think you've solidified all those beliefs, I'll question you.
Yeah.
I feel like
if you can look back on a year ago and you don't have different beliefs, you haven't grown.
I feel like it's ever evolving and ever maturing. So
So for my part, after that time, I came back to politics and started reading again and digesting what was happening. And this was around 2015, a very politically charged time in America. And I realized that the worldview, not the party, but the worldview that best met my worldview as I understood Scripture tells us to see the world was libertarianism. And I know that there's a lot of Christians that would strongly disagree with me on that, and I'd love to sit down and discuss it with them. But I'm now so hardline libertarian that I fall under a very niche subset of politics called anarcho-capitalism. I don't see any reason why one man should rule another man without their consent.
Mm-hmm.
That's basically what it comes down to. And I think that this movie has a lot of messaging that, for me and my worldview, especially my political worldview, really resonated.
I mean, just off the cuff, like from what you were saying, like there's a big theme in this movie of the non-consent of anything.
Yeah, yeah. So
like it's almost it's depicting what would the world be without, or with more over the top, like non-consent. You know.
Yeah. So the first third of the movie,
that, yeah.
the first third of the movie, Alex is not regarding the consent of his victims.
No one. Yeah.
And also not regarding the consent
Not
of
parents,
his droogs as well, his buddies.
Droogs. And if you think about like you know, go into even the things we didn't see. You know, like he's not respecting his teachers. You know, like he's not. If he does have a job, he's not respecting his employer. Like
absolutely,
like just like he is. Yeah, I would.
And
agree
then
with that. Yeah.
in the second third of the movie, he is now in a situation where he does not have consent at all. He's in prison.
Yeah.
And then in the third section of the movie, he believes he's escaped prison. He's now going to have freedom, but now he has an entirely different set of consent where he still doesn't have consent over his actions.
No. He's a puppet.
The biggest, I don't want to get to it right now, actually, because we're going to come up on it as we go through the movie, but it reminded me of a Murray Rothbard quote, which I'll share with you later.
I'm not familiar with him.
Founder of anarcho-capitalism, basically.
That makes sense.
And the founder of the Libertarian Party, too.
Okay.
And Cato and the Mises Institute.
Is it an American?
He is an American.
Okay.
Or he's passed now. 95, I think, is when he died.
Okay.
But he's a brilliant guy. So starting at the beginning of the movie, you know, we see Alex. He's out with his buddies, his droogs.
Just at the beginning of the movie, one of the positives I took away from it was I appreciated the colorfulness, which we had already mentioned earlier in this discussion, but the colorfulness, and I also liked their outfits, the Droogs outfits at the beginning.
Yeah.
Like there was something steampunk about it. The one side, the eyelash he had on one side, like I liked the way they looked.
Have you ever seen
hat,
The Warriors?
Like the basketball team?
No. No, there's a cult classic from the 80s.
I have not. No.
It's a low-budget crime movie. Takes place in New York. It's a bunch of street gangs.
Okay.
And every street gang has these very elaborate themes.
Okay.
Which we see
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that at
Clockwork
all.
Orange as well.
But I liked just I don't know if that'd be within the cinematography or the costumes, at least, or like in the set design. Like I appreciated that. Like there was some camera work too that was very cool that got you into a way of setting a specific mood and stuff. So I think some of that stuff was well done. The stuff that was in the house with the guy in the wheelchair, like there were some scenes were filmed like that. Definitely, I feel like the mood got across that they were achieving. So I liked some of the cinematography, the set design, and the costumes.
I agree, but it also, I think a lot of the camera work felt very college film student.
Okay. Like
somebody that's not that great with a camera, but they want to do these elaborate shots. Like I felt like a lot of the direction of the movie, I feel, comes off real cheeseball.
I'd be curious to see if that's how Kubrick's other movies are. Like if there's similar crossover there. But I did the credits. The opening credits were it's just the blue and orange screen.
Yeah,
that was actually like hard to watch with my eyes.
Made me think
like,
of Monty Python.
Yeah. So but so you're giving a little synopsis at the beginning. You can continue. But I liked the costumes as we saw them in the milk bar.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought that was a cool setting. It looked very emo. I thought I was watching a Panic at the Disco music video.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So
I don't want to dwell too much on the first 15 minutes. But the first 15 minutes, we have Alexander Delarge exerting his will over his friends, exerting his will over a homeless man, exerting a will over a woman. And so there's no consent.
Right.
There's no voluntary interaction.
Yeah.
But also, you know, in England for a long time, and I think by the time this movie had come out and the book was written, firearms are illegal.
Okay. And
there's a brilliant thing about firearms, which is that they level the playing field. They are the great equalizer.
Mm-hmm.
I can't say without a doubt that the homeless man would have been able to defend himself if he had a gun. But
He was pretty inebriated.
yeah, or that the woman and her husband wouldn't have been burglared and raped had
And then
they had a gun, and the other
she
woman
inevitably died then after that.
Yeah, and then the other woman died as well.
Yeah.
I can't say for a fact that wouldn't have happened, but we do know statistically, communities where legal gun ownership is high, violent crime is low, because violence is expensive for all sides involved, and the more dangerous you suspect your target might be, the more likely you are to respect the fact that they could do damage, right? So the mere fact that nobody in this film is able to defend themselves allows these hoodlums to be far more violent than they otherwise would be.
Yeah.
So that's my biggest takeaway from that first 15 minutes.
There was a moment where I was hoping that, okay, maybe they're going to be like vigilantes because they go into that dilapidated like theater, and they
There's a
come
woman
across,
being raped.
and I was like, oh, okay, so maybe they're
First
actually
rape
good
scene.
guys.
Yeah.
No, because then they immediately go from that scene to the house, and they
Do the same thing.
ransack the house and do the exact same thing. I'm like, okay, so what? Yeah,
Yeah.
so that was confusing.
Yeah,
They were just out to cause ruckus.
Yeah.
They were just causing ruckus. If there was something that they could disrupt, they'll disrupt it. They'll disrupt something of a rape, and then they'll go do their own rape because that rape would disrupt what these other people were doing.
right.
Yeah, it was
Antisocial behavior.
yeah.
But yeah, so violence in my mind is tragic. All violence is tragic.
Yeah.
We have a long history in America of gun violence in schools.
Yeah.
In 1995 is when they passed the Gun-Free School Act. Gun violence in schools has skyrocketed since then. Right? You've created a weak target.
Well, I don't know if this is the place to have this conversation, but the gun-free school, like, I didn't know there was schools with guns in it before the gun-free school act. Like,
Yeah, you go back to the 80s, it was really common for schools to have a riflery team. In
but
fact,
like the kids didn't have those rifles in their classrooms with them, so it's not like they were going into their math class
I see
with a
what you
gun on their back. Like,
So-
like
in more rural areas, yeah.
like some schools still have archery and stuff like those are weapons and things, or fencing.
In more
even, but,
rural
like,
areas, it wouldn't be uncommon.
Okay, even if there is a gun team or a shooting team, like that doesn't mean they have those weapons in their classrooms. Like I mean, I grew up in a pretty country area. Like I know some of my high school friends, as we all got our license, were driving. Like some of those guys had gun racks in their truck.
Sure.
So like I know like they had guns, but like
They wouldn't have been able to park those.
no,
trucks
they
on
didn't have
school
the guns on
property.
campus.
Yeah.
But I knew they had access to guns and stuff. But even if they had guns, none of them were like, well, you know what? I'm going to keep this in my book bag today, just for fun. Like,
Sure,
It's like
sure.
I can't imagine a time where people were just taking guns to school because they were allowed to.
It was more common than you might think. It wasn't like the Wild Wild West, but actually, Wild Wild West is a good example.
Will Smith.
The Will Smith movie.
Yep.
No, there's a terrific book called The Not So Wild West,
Okay.
and it's about how the way we see it in cinema doesn't live up to standards, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So the more guns are a great equalizer, and the more people that are armed, the more chance, the higher risk violent acts are, and so violent crime goes down, and we see it time and time again. The parents then at the next morning, you've got mom knocks on the door, says, "You going to school?" And he's like, "No, I'm sick."
yeah.
And she's like, "You've been sick all week." And he's like, "Well, if I don't rest now, I'll miss even more school."
Yeah.
And she just kind of lets it go.
The snake in his
Yeah.
his bed drawer, that was a surprise. So the actor
Yeah.
that played Alex is afraid of snakes.
Oh,
so
really?
Stanley put that in the drawer as a
spook 'em.
surprise to spook him and to kind of create a specific sort of emotion.
No surprise that a film about a sociopath is made by a sociopath.
Yeah. But yeah, I was just like, oh, there's a snake in your Sure.
Yeah, that's weird. That was weird.
That
I was
was-
wondering
yeah.
what the purpose of that
Yeah,
was.
like well, I mean, as far as the movie goes, I still don't think it served a purpose. But like,
No.
but maybe for the actor that played Alex in the rest of filming that scene, it helped him create emotion. But like, for that snake to be on camera, I'm like, am I missing something?
Yeah.
Same with jumping ahead a little bit. Same with the cat lady house.
Yeah. Dozens of cats.
The penis statue.
Yeah.
I'm trying really hard to understand some of the symbolism, and that had to have been a symbolism of something. Like there had to have, but like because it's it's a room full of pussies,
Yeah.
and there's
With
a big
lots of art.
and there are lots of female art,
Genitalia art.
yeah, and then there's a huge ceramic penis.
I would say
Like,
don't
ew.
spend too much time trying to figure out what things mean in a Kubrick film because by this time he was already just throwing things in knowing that people would say, what's that supposed to mean?
Right.
So some of it doesn't have meaning.
That takes away from
Yeah.
if that's his point. And okay, so if there's two options, there either is a symbolism in it that has to do with the film and the story
Yeah.
that we're supposed to interpret and take away with eventually, or it's meant as a red herring. If it's a red herring, it takes away from the film experience.
I don't think it's entirely a red herring, but I also don't think...
Because I spent more time thinking about the penis, all the cats, all the artwork than I was the dialogue going on between Alex and the lady.
Okay, yeah.
And the next thing I know, she's on her back getting
Beaten to death.
with a penis.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wait, what did I miss? Because I was too busy watching all the visualization of the room.
I mean, if it is symbolism, I think it's a bit ham-fisted, to be honest.
It is a satire.
That's true.
The movie is
That's
the
true.
movie and the book are
Absurdist
satires.
satire.
But
That scene specifically is a great example where a handgun would have resolved it quickly. If she had
Yeah.
a handgun somewhere in her house, she would have run from that room to it.
yeah,
But instead, she picks up the closest weapon she's got, which is a bust of, I think, was actually Mozart, which there's some interesting.
the Beethoven theme in it. Yeah,
Yeah. And so
Ludwig
that's
van.
Ludwig van. That's the best she had to defend herself with. Again, even if it was somewhere in the house that she had a gun, that's somewhere she has to go to level the playing field,
Right.
and get this young aggressor out of her house. But yeah, going back to the parents, right? We get this impression that the parents are either oblivious or they are self-deluding that their son's not a delinquent.
Yeah,
And then we meet the youth parole officer assigned to Alex, Mr. Deltoid,
what a gem.
which, man, did he skeeve me out. And early on in that scene, I'm like, is this guy a pedophile? And then he just straight up gropes Alex. I was like, yeah, he's definitely a
Yeah,
pedophile.
absolutely. Yeah, not even like subtly grooming. It was just
And that,
yeah.
Going back again to my biases of government bad, with government, anything that the government does, they de facto create a monopoly for, right? So if they are if they
Within their own nation.
within their own nation,
Yeah.
so the government has a youth parole program, and certainly there are going to be philanthropic organizations that are also doing that same work, even when the government has a monopoly on it. But the government will always outfund them because they can just take it in taxes.
Outfund them, out-resource them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So then that becomes a natural preying ground for predators.
Yep.
And we see that in a lot of different areas, right? We see that in the Catholic Church, which is very much a monopoly on Christian religion. We see that in...
Well, you're saying Catholicism as a whole?
yeah, in the Catholic
Because
Church...
that's not why Catholicism was started, though.
No, I
Or
know,
like-
I know.
Okay.
So
Like,
I'm not
okay.
saying that these things are... I'm not saying that the child youth program in the UK, for example, that Mr. Deltoid worked with, was started for pedophiles.
Okay. I
but
got you.
that it becomes
okay.
a natural attractant to pedophiles.
I follow. Okay. Okay.
And so we see that with the Catholic Church. We see it with the teachers' unions in America. And the result is that the incentive is such that the unions, the industry, the what's the word I'm looking for? The institution, to avoid scandal, is going to shuffle these people around.
You see in athletics, too.
See it in athletics.
Even going all the way to professional athletics
Yep.
and stuff like it.
Yep.
It's not just kids and adults. It's
Yeah.
Adults on adults, yeah.
Yeah, so it becomes a natural preying ground, and
Absolutely.
and if you don't have proper decentralization of powers, if you don't have enough market choice, these people proliferate, and instead of being removed,
Yeah.
If a piano teacher is touching kids, the moment somebody finds out, he's gone. He's never teaching piano again. Right? But a high school teacher touching kids, the union steps in, they put him into a room where he finishes off the semester, then they probably shuffle him to a different school. It's a story that happens a ton. Like, we know how prolific it is in the Catholic Church because it's been exposed, but it's actually more prolific in public schooling, and they just do a really good job of keeping it under wraps.
And just to clarify, we're not asserting that all public schools have this issue, but
I'm asserting that all teachers are pedophiles. That's just an untenable argument. No, it's just that it becomes like, put yourselves in the shoes of a pedophile. Well, where are all the kids? Right? Like, that's your hunting ground right there. And then, so that's really all I want to say about that. But like, it's one of the issues of monopolization is that bad behavior goes unpunished, oftentimes gets rewarded. So
it does seem that way. Yeah.
This is going to be a heavy episode.
Yeah. Oh, no, yeah.
Then we have Dim and Georgie attempt to usurp Alex's control over the group.
Yes.
And hierarchy is a natural and unavoidable thing. We see it all through nature. Whenever, as Macho Man Randy Savage said, the cream rises to the top. And so if whatever your business is, whoever's good at that is going to do better in that, right? So if you're in real estate, the best real estate agents are going to rise to the top. Hierarchy is natural. So if your business is violence, then the natural hierarchy is going to be based on violence. Alex is the most violent.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Dim and Georgie pull one over on him, but up until then, Alex is the most violent, so he controls the group.
Yeah.
You have any thoughts on that?
I don't. I'm right there with you. I agree. Like, I'd say that follows with my thought process.
Yeah. And then jumping forward to Alex getting arrested. He's in that police interrogation room, and you get the impression pretty quickly that these are somewhat crooked cops. On the one hand, you're cheering for him because this guy is evil, pure evil. But on the other hand, what if they were wrong?
Yeah.
Right? Now, clearly Alex is a sociopath. He starts lying immediately, making up a story, playing on emotions to try and get out of it, and has no remorse either. But what if the police were wrong and they had the wrong guy? They're using violence to get information from this kid.
Right.
Right? And when you put rights enforcement into the hands of a small group of people and there's no competition, right, which is what police is, that's when you get all kinds of horrific things. Over-policed areas, right? Under-policed areas as well. I have a lot of thoughts on what the fallout of what happened with George Floyd. But unquestionably, what those cops did was pure evil.
Yeah. Oh,
right?
Unequivocally, yeah.
And that's the result of not having competition in policing, right? The same things that's wrong with teachers' unions is wrong with police unions. You get a bad apple, right? And you'll hear a lot of the defense of police officers. So like, well, it was a bad apple. But the saying is, a bad apple spoils the bunch.
Right.
Right?
But, I mean, I guess from the teaching perspective, because, I've said this last episode, like, my wife is a teacher.
Yeah,
of course. So this is one of the things where
I have
Nelson
nothing
and I
but contempt for her.
Right. No, I get that. Yeah. So many contempts. But in the same breath, like, you can go through high school and not interact with a pedophile.
For sure.
It's like there is
Sure.
you can be a police officer and be a good egg. So like
absolutely.
Right.
My point is that the bad eggs don't get weeded out.
All of the bad eggs don't get weeded out.
Most of the bad eggs.
there's no way of knowing. There's no way of knowing that your statement is factual.
Okay.
Like there's no way of knowing a statistic, because if it is not being
That's fair.
dealt with, it's not being documented.
Yeah, exactly.
What is being dealt with is all that we have to go on
So,
document. It's like it's all speculation. I'm not assuming altruisticness.
I will say
or-
far too often we see police officers commit a heinous act, and we look into their records, and it's not the first time, and it's not even the first precinct, and the last time they had a really bad one was at a different precinct, right? They get shuffled around. We would see a lot less of that if there A, wasn't a union, and B, was competition for defense, protection, rights enforcement. If in most jobs, in private schools, if a teacher doesn't perform, what happens? They're gone.
They're rift, yeah.
In public schools, far too often, if a teacher doesn't perform, not even just like pedophiles and all that stuff, like a teacher just
Academically.
isn't very good at teaching.
Yeah.
The union protects them, right? And this is the effect that all unions have. It's not just teaching. Unions protect. They lower the overall quality. You can name probably on one hand the great teachers you had.
That's not true. I had a good high school experience.
Okay.
I had a good high school. Like, I mean, this is a single perspective.
Full public school experience.
Full public school, like K through 12, and then my college. Well, I guess it was a Christian college, but I mean, it was as close to a public college. I mean, it wasn't a state college, but it was anyone could have got in.
Yeah.
So it wasn't. But like I had a great experience. Like I liked all like now, and some of the teachers I had beef with is because they were trying to instill in me some better discipline because I was pretty much a punk. But like I had a great. I personally enjoyed my K through 12 experience, with very little. And the issues I guess I could, if I could pinpoint some issues, they were me.
Okay.
It was me making maybe some wrong class choices or some wrong like academic path choices where I'm like, I shouldn't have taken this route. But like the teachers, my specific perspective, I had a good time.
I think that that's not most people's experience.
Okay.
And I like to clarify, I've got several friends that are public school teachers, and I know are doing their best to be great public school teachers.
Yeah.
And so if you're a public school teacher and you're going in there and you're trying to provide quality education, connect with these kids, and set them up for success, I'm not talking about you.
Right.
Every public school teacher I know knows that the majority of the teachers in their school are not doing that.
Right. And this may be a tangent here, but my wife's perspective and the thing I've experienced in the last 10 years of watching her do what she does and pursue her career, the union has not been the biggest issue within my wife's education career.
It's administration.
It's the board of education.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's again, and whether this goes with the Clockwork Orange or not, but like we're on the subject here.
Sure. That's what we're here for.
It's not so much they're not teaching to teach lessons. They're teaching to pass tests.
Yeah.
And that's not a union thing. So
Right,
if my wife had
that's
any,
a governance
if
thing.
my wife had any feedback about public schools,
Abolish the federal
it would
Department of Education.
the testing.
Yeah.
It wouldn't necessarily be like it would just be the testing, because like it's like, oh, we can't really go into this specific thing too much because that's going to put us back, because tests are in 4 weeks and we have to make sure it's like it's testing. Everything revolves around testing, and that's where, and everyone tests differently.
Yes.
But there's one scale for testing,
Yes.
whether you have
Standardized tests
learning
are really good
issues
at determining
or
if you're
you're
a white male.
academically
And I
prolific.
say that as a white male.
Yeah.
So, but I want to clarify, like, I empathize a lot with teachers.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the teachers that I know are not just cashing a check.
Right.
A lot of the teachers that I had were.
Okay. Could there have been just a bad school? Is
No.
that possible? Like bad,
No.
like a bad administration allowing for multiple teachers to have a toxic situation?
No, I don't think it's just the school. I think it's our entire education system in America. And this would be a whole. I could spend 2 hours talking about this.
I'm here for it
But
if you want
like
to.
we like our education system is based on the Prussian model of education. Okay, during the Prussian Empire, I can't remember which emperor it was, but he knew that the educated class were making better soldiers, and so he wanted better education. The entire aim of his education system, which we pretty much copied, was to make better soldiers. Our education system has one goal. It's not to educate you. It's not to set you up for success. It's to get you to be a good factory worker and a good soldier. Okay? We call that a contributing member of society, but that really is the goal. If you want to read more about that, check out John Taylor Gatto's book, Dumbing Us Down, The Hidden Curriculum of Compulsory Schooling.
2022, you're saying modern public schools.
Yeah. Still follows the Prussian
goal
model.
for those students is for factory workers. I don't know if I agree with that, Nelson.
Cogs in a machine, man. That's what they're breeding.
But like, if they're breeding factory workers, why is testing wouldn't be a huge emphasis then? Because testing is just for further education.
So our quality of education has gone down. That's a measurable.
I would absolutely.
That's a measurable
agree with that.
truth.
Yes.
What is the purpose of reducing a quality of education? What could a country stand to gain? I think the book Fahrenheit 4051 tells us a lot about what a country stands to gain.
I have not read that one.
An educated populace is a dangerous populace to the ruling elite.
I see it.
You're getting a heavy dose of my biases
no,
here.
And I love this conversation. Like I like challenging my thoughts, and I like hopefully contributing challenging thoughts as well. So
and challenging my thoughts certainly.
I see it differently. And again, I am an optimist through and through. Like if anyone out there's listening, I'm a 7 on the Enneagram.
I'm a short-term pessimist, long-term optimist.
I am an optimist through and through. So like that's my perspective, and I'm open to disagreement. I'm here for a respectful and kind debate. I love that.
Sure.
And honestly, my intention is never to argue someone to a point. So like, and Nelson and I have this great relationship where I love it. So anyways, continuing, education. I feel like I feel like the issue with modern public schools and the bringing down of the academic quality, I think it's more the factors that go into that is more from outside of the school than it is inside the school. And I think it's the school trying to stay relevant because like there's a lot of things going on outside of schools, poverty, or kids not going to public schools. So the kids that are going to public schools, like there's some demographics that have less means, and so for them to continue their education, they have to pass tests, and if they don't pass that test, then they won't come back next school year. So they lower the standard for the test, so that kid can actually stay in another year versus not come back. It's like I feel like there's definitely more. There's always going to be more than one factor when it comes to that. So just and so from my perspective and what I've seen the last 10 years being married to a teacher, and for a very small portion of my life potentially thinking about going into education, I think it's more socio-economical than it is the board. Like, as much as I disagree with some of the stuff the Board of Education is doing,
right? I
think there's bigger issues with community, townships, like logistics that come with domestic poverty. I think all of those things also have factors into it that are delegated into. Well, okay, if we lower our test standards, then Johnny can come back next year rather than
no child
out.
Left behind.
Right. So
I want to say
my perspective.
There are a host of reasons that our education system is broken. I was specifically drawing attention to quality of teachers being driven down by unions because of the monopolization that we see, and that carries over to what we see with Mr. Deltoid.
Right. Absolutely.
Is that Mr. Deltoid does not have Alex's best interest at heart.
No.
Right?
He is out to see what Mr. Deltoid can get.
Exactly. Yeah. And so unions tend to attract that. They tend to attract the lowest common denominator They don't drive excellence. And so I have a lot of empathy for teachers. I have empathy for school administrators because they're working in a broken system, right? There's a lot of issues and corruption all the way down. But specifically, as applies to Clockwork Orange, that's why I brought up unions and teacher qualities.
No, I like these little tangent conversations too. There's good stuff there. And for you as the listener, this is probably
it's probably edited down some,
right? But like we want to hear feedback too. Like any of the social medias that we're on, like
tell me why I'm wrong.
We're not done yet, but like join the conversation. Let us know your thoughts. Teachers out there, like what are some things that you're thinking about?
What are the issues you see in the education
right? Yeah,
system?
and we don't need to get into specific details. We're not asking for personal
out your friends.
Yeah, but just like, do you have pros and cons to working in the teaching education system? So, what's your thoughts? Again, we want this to be a respectful conversation, a place for people to have a voice.
Yeah,
and leave respected. We don't want anything to get out of hand, but just join the conversation. People tend to take it and
none of this is personal.
Steamroll things. So yeah, so just,
none of this is personal. We all want a better world.
Right.
We disagree on how we get there.
Right. I'm pro public schools. My kids are going to go public schools, and I know Nelson differs to that.
Yeah.
But I'm open to
Boy,
that.
howdy do I.
I'm open to that. And I like that. Like, I know Nelson's kids, and I think they're great kids, and I think
they're feral.
I love it. I love it. So just it's good stuff.
But getting back to Clockwork Orange, he's arrested. Then during prison processing, tying back to, I said Alex is a sociopath. He grins when he says he's been charged with murder. Yeah. He's proud of it. He's just an evil person.
Yeah.
And then
is there anything in the movie that implies or gives us weight to why? Do we know why Alex is the way he is? We don't see his parents being abusive.
Right.
I don't see signs of him being outside of the creepy guy.
Yeah.
Outside of him, I don't see any signs of him being physically abused, sexually abused. Like, is there anything in this movie, and again, neither of us have read the book,
right,
that gives weight to why he is the way he is?
It's possible that Kubrick and Burgess are making a point about socioeconomics and a product of your environment, because we know the apartment building is run down. We also know the influence of his friends.
It's true, yeah.
I think, though, that they very intentionally don't draw attention to it, because as soon as you say why he's this way,
there's sympathy.
There's sympathy, one, but also it becomes a slippery slope to excusing or justifying the behavior.
Okay,
and
so
it doesn't matter what your background is. You're still responsible for your choices.
Absolutely, we're seeing all of Alex's actions.
Yeah,
without knowing the justification.
Yeah, without
whether the justification is right or wrong.
Right,
we're seeing just the outcome of something we don't know about.
And I don't really buy into the whole nature nurture argument anyway. I think Scripture tells us that we are broken people.
Yep.
That we are sinful people, that we are all capable of grotesque acts.
Yeah.
History teaches us the same thing.
Oh, does it? Yeah.
And so I think it actually benefits the story and benefits the message of the story that we don't have a justification for his behavior.
Okay. I can get behind that. Yeah.
But in this scene, in processing, we meet my favorite character in the movie, which is the prison guard, who is just an absurd caricature of the punitive judicial system, right? We're not looking to rehabilitate you. We want to punish you.
Yeah.
And I don't know where I land on that. That's a question that the movie doesn't answer but grapples with.
Yeah, it definitely leaves us wanting more of that conversation.
It's unsatisfying there, and I think the story benefits from it. So I was surprised, though, that in the prison processing scene, they didn't include something like him being sprayed down with a fire hose and shaved. Mm. Right? They left him with some of his humanity still.
Yeah. Well, honestly, what they did show, though, was the cavity search.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like that's probably the most...
And he's grinning through the whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So I feel like that's probably the most dehumanizing, in my opinion. Like, if someone's looking up your tailpipe, I think shaving's nothing compared
If they're
to
not
that.
a doctor.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. So,
And it's not a consenting adult relationship.
right. But I mean, but in prison, you've given up all consent. Like,
No, you haven't given it. It's been taken from you.
okay, there's a conversation there. So,
Right? Because not everybody in
but-
prison
but-
is guilty of the crimes they've been convicted of.
right. Okay. But in this specific scenario,
Yeah.
Alex is absolutely guilty.
Sure.
And he is in a place where he has lost all ability to have freedom of choice because he murdered someone
Yeah.
and led to the death of a second person, which isn't even dealt
Charged with. Yeah.
Right, isn't even dealt with. It's like I would say it is like, I think there are times when our rights and responsibilities should be removed from us without our consent. And I think knowing what Alex did, I think there's a good point. Yeah, he should be, and it's not like he doesn't know about prison. It's not like he doesn't know what the prison system is. Like he knows what the risks are every time he
And
goes
doesn't
out and
wanna
puts
go
that
there.
fat nose on.
And doesn't want to go there, which we see in the interrogation room.
Right. So like he knows if this was a story about someone who was not guilty, who was being falsely accused, then yeah, I think it'd be different. But like there are some people who need rights
And that comes
restricted.
that comes to the question of a question the movie grapples with and doesn't answer, which is, what is the best retribution for the victim? Now, the movie touches briefly on what I believe is the best retribution for the victim.
Dehydrating his eyeballs.
That's right.
Yes.
No, when he returns home, all of his possessions are gone,
Yeah.
and his parents said, "Oh, it's a new program." They confiscated them, sold them to provide some financial restitution to the families that you right. And so, I think that. So again, going back to my biases, the chief ends of government, in my opinion, as I see it, looking through history and seeing how it behaves, the chief end of government is to replace God. It's as Dave Smith, one of my favorite political commentators, says, government is a mafia parading as a human rights organization. They try to replace what the church's responsibility in the world is through humanitarian aid, and they try to replace God's role in A, being our Lord and leader, and B, defining morality. Right? So what we see in Scripture, David, with the situation with Bathsheba and Uriah, he writes a psalm about it later and says, "I've sinned against you and you alone," speaking to God. "For years I wrestled with that." Because, no, you also sinned against Uriah and Bathsheba and your now son. Delving into libertarian ideas, I understand this better, that all things in the world are chiefly God's.
Yeah.
So any rights violations is also a property violation against God.
Yeah.
What we see in A Clockwork Orange is actually a perfect summary of how I see government replacing God. Let me get it. I actually have it written down here for the quote. This is what the prison warden, when they're releasing Alex. "An eye for an eye, I say. If someone hits you, you hit back, do you not? Why then should not the state very severely hit by you, brutal offenders, not hit back also?" So it's taking the place of God and saying that everything in this country is the government's. So any sin against your fellow citizen is ultimately a sin against the state, and the state needs to punish you. I don't see national sovereignty as being just.
So do you think? How do I ask this?
How then should the justice be served?
Or like, okay, we'll go in a little deeper, or I guess maybe a little bit bigger picture. Like, so do you think that government shouldn't exist in general?
Yes.
Okay, so you think we should be able to govern ourselves,
Yes.
no restrictions and stuff? I don't think that's naturally possible.
We have several examples of it through history.
And how did those end up?
Almost all of them eventually were dominated by a larger state, and I understand.
I don't necessarily disagree with the whole idea of because not everyone
do
on the
wanna say-
planet is a Christian.
Right.
We don't have the same moral standards, so there will immediately be a vacuum.
Okay, so I'll I'll touch
of
that briefly.
safety.
I do want to say that something being difficult to achieve and maybe even impossible to achieve doesn't mean it's not worth striving for.
Right. God hasn't called us, though, to create a one world, self-governed organism.
No.
So,
But he has called us to expand his kingdom
and in every story of the Bible, correct, absolutely. In every story of the
to
Bible,
the ends of the earth.
there's some form of hierarchy in every single story of the Bible.
Yeah.
From Genesis to Revelation.
So
there's never a time where he, except for the Garden of Eden, but even in that very moment, Adam and Eve probably could have used a little bit of guidance to say, hey, remember there's reasons you can't touch that tree. It was like, so left up to our own accord, even in paradise,
Yeah.
we all need help because we are imperfect beings. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like it is not that it's not something we should strive for,
Yeah.
but I don't think it's in our best benefit to just assume that we should self-govern ourselves, because when you're talking medicine, when you're talking education, when you're talking safety from others,
Yeah.
like that very single moment when there's a negative, there's a vacuum.
Yeah.
Like I think that's an impossible achievement.
I a couple thoughts on that, because to really dive into how a fully free and voluntary society would work, that's going to be a couple hours, and it's a conversation I'd love to have, and I think we'll have it in bits
Bonus
and pieces.
episode.
We'll have it in bits and pieces over the course of these episodes. But basically, the issues that people see with anarchist idea is always well, what if this happens? Yeah. But the what if is already happening under the state and by the state.
Explain that.
So, all right, taxation.
Yeah.
Libertarians like to say taxation is theft. Right?
Okay.
You've heard that before?
I've heard that, yes.
And they say it's theft because what happens if you don't pay your taxes? Eventually, somebody with a gun shows up.
Coming after you with your money.
If you keep refusing
imprisonment.
to pay, if you keep refusing to pay, eventually somebody with a gun shows up.
Not drawn, but reinforcement.
In some cases, drawn.
In America?
Yes.
If you don't pay your taxes, they're going to come to your door with a gun drawn, asking for money?
It happens.
I need to see an article.
All right, I will show you some.
All right.
All right. But no, it happens. Eventually, somebody with a gun shows up, and if they have a gun, that is threat of violence. So,
well, yeah,
you give money under threat of violence, and so it's not voluntary. Taxes aren't voluntary.
No one's ever said it was voluntary.
I know, but that's what makes it theft.
Okay.
If somebody takes your possessions and it's not voluntary, that's theft. So,
Jesus was not anti-tax. You know that, right?
Actually, make your case that Jesus wasn't anti-tax.
I mean, you know exactly what scripture I'm going to say.
Right. And I've heard this.
Give to Caesar what is Caesar's and give,
Okay.
But I think that just means like...
No. You got to finish the verse.
Let me look the verse up then.
Give to Caesar what is Caesar's,
okay,
and give to God what is God's.
Right.
How did Jesus in that text determine what was Caesar's?
It had his face on it.
It had his face on it.
Right. All of our money has presidents on it.
That verse is way more about Imago Dei, you are made in the image of God, than it is about taxation.
But he is talking money, though.
He's talking money briefly.
Yeah.
But as almost always, Jesus is making a far broader picture about your relationship to God.
Right.
You are made in the image of God, so you give yourself and all of you to God.
Right. But he is also talking physical, like...
Right.
Because that conversation does go to the point of like they are talking just finances at first.
Sure.
Then it goes. Then Jesus as always takes it deeper. But the start of that conversation is personal finance.
Well, temple tax.
Yeah.
Okay, so I needed to clarify first that Jesus is using this to illustrate a much broader point.
Right.
Now, even backing up to, is Jesus for or against taxation? Before that line, we have Jesus about to enter the temple without paying his tax. Mm-hmm. And Pharisees say to Peter, aren't you guys going to pay the tax? And so Peter says, Jesus, we're going to pay the tax, right? And Jesus says, well, the sons of the king don't pay the tax. That's for everybody else. But so that we don't create an offense, go catch a fish and see what's in its mouth. Okay? So Jesus isn't pro-tax. He's pro not creating an offense. Mm-hmm. Later in Scripture, in Romans 13, where Paul writes, and this is why we pay taxes, it's again, we pay taxes out of a choice to be obedient, mm-hmm. and and a choice to honor those put into positions of authority. Paul and Jesus do not say taxation is good. They simply say, submit yourself to it.
Right. So they're not anti.
Right.
They're just...
So then let me ask you this.
Yeah.
What would Jesus and Paul say the tax rate should be?
Oh, I have no idea. I mean, probably 2 shekels on a goat.
So my broader point is that
it may have been.
We then see later on, right? Yeah. Jesus interacts with slaves. He doesn't say stop being a slave and rebel, right? He says submit to your earthly masters and do your best. Mm-hmm. Jesus interacts with people who own slaves. Doesn't tell them to stop owning slaves.
Right.
He says treat your slaves really well. And Paul does the same thing in the epistles. I see taxation. If we look at the totality of Scripture, taxation is slavery, and like slavery, Jesus doesn't immediately call us to dispel with it, to revolt against it, to fight against it, or to end it. He tells us to do it in a way that's going to glorify God. Mm. I believe choosing to pay your taxes and pay them appropriately, and also taking every tax benefit that the government offers you, is a way to glorify God. Mm. I also believe that taxation is a form of slavery and oppression by a government, and that ideally there would be no tax.
I mean, if you believe that we can live without a government, then yes, I can understand the feeling of, okay, if I can live without you, then I'm not going to give you money because I don't need you.
Yes, but I choose to because God tells me to.
Right, but the opposite perspective would be like, okay, Jeff, there's a lot of things that I benefit from the government. Like I've never, like I feel like my community is safer because I have a fire department, because I have a hospital, because I have police officers roaming the streets. Like I feel like I'm safer by that. I feel like I'm safer because there's schools where kids can not rebutting that conversation, but like I feel like there's schools going to get an education for free, if not cheap. Like medicine, like just like all these things that I couldn't do on my own. Mm-hmm. Like I do. Now, does all my tax money go to good things? I doubt it.
Oh, very much not.
But
the majority does not.
But I don't necessarily have an issue of funding things that I know I've benefited from. So to say like I'm not going to give my money to something, but utilize all the resources that are being taken from those funds, I'd have a hard. So I don't see it as stuff like I'm very much paying for things that I utilize.
Okay.
Roads. Like roads.
Don't get me started on roads. Hold on.
Do you not drive roads?
I try not to. No.
Okay. Fair enough.
I levitate my car inches above it. No.
Anti-levitation.
So listen. Does the government provide services?
Absolutely.
Does the government charge for those services?
Absolutely.
Okay. Tell me something that, in your experience, the government does really well.
I wasn't prepared for this. Tell you something that the government does very well. It's
my experience.
I get that it's a pretty open-ended question. I guess. Can you give me more of a specific like? Give me a government department.
I'm going to explain why I asked the question.
Okay.
The government absolutely provides services.
Yeah.
Monopolies
that they need funding for.
Monopolies tend toward mediocrity.
Okay.
All right, throughout history. I can't think of his name. I got to pull it up because I have to reference this.
You can edit this out. You're good.
I wasn't expecting to go over this, so. Myth of Natural Monopoly is the name of it.
Is it a book or just a
Thomas J. DiLorenzo. Okay, and we're back. So you can look this up at Mises Institute. Mises is a terrific think tank that focuses on free trade, free people, anarcho-capitalism.
He's also a good rapper, Mises. Yeah,
Never heard of him.
just kidding. That was a joke.
Anyway, Thomas J. DiLorenzo is a contributing thinker and writer with them regularly. He has a really terrific essay titled "The Myth of Natural Monopoly." Okay, so I'm not going to go into it too far, but what we're taught in school, that monopolies happen and we need the government to end them, it's actually kind of the opposite. Monopolies happen because of government assistance, and then those monopolies are eventually ended by the same government that created them.
What's the difference between a monopoly and a natural hierarchy that we talked about earlier in the episode?
Sure.
Where you say like the strongest do inevitably come out, like the strongest realtor. Like I see monopolies as that.
Okay, yeah.
Like they just naturally outperform.
Yeah.
Like there is a correlation.
Okay. So it is not uncommon for one particular company within an industry to outperform the others.
Yeah.
Right? Because natural hierarchies happen.
Yeah.
When they do, those other companies copy that succeeding
Formula.
company.
Yeah.
Okay? They steal, they beg, borrow, and steal what in the industry term is best practices. Okay? So, even during the big trust busting era, a lot of these monopolies were already becoming too fragile because of their scale. Because smaller companies can then, like, if the monopoly raises its prices to be exploitative, that creates an opportunity for smaller companies to operate at the actual price and outbid them. Okay? If the monopoly starts buying up the competition, which we've also seen, that actually leaves them weak infrastructure-wise, and it actually damages the company. During the big trust-busting era, by the end of the era, these companies, by the time they get busted up, they're already not monopolies. They're already fairly open and free markets.
Yeah.
So, to answer your question of natural hierarchies, yes, for a period of time, a monopoly may happen naturally, but it's brief and it's an anomaly in the market. What's much more common in the market is broad decentralization. When there isn't a coercive power enforcing the monopoly, it's the natural state is to decentralize. What you'll end up with is several companies that are themselves the cream of the crop, and other companies that aren't, but not one reigning supreme.
Right.
If, for example, monopoly was the natural status quo, we would have a single world government, not several governments. You've got coercive people in an area, they become the government. That's a natural hierarchy of sorts. They are a monopoly within their area, but they're not a global monopoly.
Right.
And the only reason they're able to have the monopoly is because they create rules that you can't overturn the monopoly. Right. And they have the power to enforce that. In a truly free and voluntary society, monopolies would be uncommon. Any of the goods and services that government currently provides, free market enterprises do and have also provided. We know that monopolies tend towards lower quality and higher prices. Free markets tend towards higher quality, lower prices. Right? So, yeah, I'm happy to pay for a fire department, police, education, all of that stuff that government provides. I would just rather pay it to private companies who have to compete for my money, rather than a monopoly that if I don't pay, there's threat of violence.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
that's in a nutshell anarcho-capitalism.
Yeah. Oh man, good conversation. I love this. We should probably start rounding it out here.
Sure.
Any thoughts? Any final thoughts about A Clockwork Orange?
I've got two that I have to hit on.
Hit them out. Yep.
Okay, so in the prison scene, the minister comes in and is inspecting.
Yes.
The minister says, "How many to a cell?" The governor says, 4 in this block, sir." The minister says, "Cram criminals together, and what do you get? Concentrated criminality. Crime in the midst of punishment." The governor says, "I agree, sir. What we need are larger prisons, more money. The ministers, and up until this point, I'm on the minister's side. And the minister says, not a chance, my dear fellow. The government can't be concerned any longer with outmoded penological theories. So he's looking for to reduce recidivism by having reformatory style prisons.
Yeah.
Again, I'm on his side.
Yep.
Soon we may be needing all our prison space for political offenders.
Mm-hmm.
Common criminals like these are best dealt with on a purely curative basis. Kill the criminal reflex, that's all. Full implementation is in a year's time. Punishment means nothing to them. You can see that. They enjoy their so-called punishment. So, everything the minister says, except for that one sentence squeezed in the middle, I agree. But that one sentence in the middle, you find out what his motive is. Right? And that again, going back to my opinion of what the state is. Right? Got to crush the political dissidents. Can't have people disagreeing with what we're doing.
Yeah.
And then later we have the writer in the wheelchair. The writer in the wheelchair, the reason he's happy that he meets Alex is because he's going to be able to expose the totalitarianism of this.
He found a vessel to put forth his plan in. Yeah.
No. Well, his plan was to shut down the government and expose their tyranny. And then we have the priest in the scene where Alex is being demonstrated as being rehabilitated.
Mm.
The priest says, choice. The boy has no real choice, has he? Self-interest, fear of physical pain drove him to that grotesque act of self-abasement. Its sincerity was clearly to be seen. He ceases also to be a creature capable of moral choice.
Yeah.
To which the minister responds, Padre, these are subtleties. We are not concerned with motive, with the higher ethics. We are concerned only with cutting down crime and with relieving the ghastly congestion in our prisons. He will be your true Christian, ready to turn the other cheek, ready to be crucified rather than... I must have had it wrong. I have crucified rather than crucified. Sick to the very heart at the thought of even killing a fly. Reclamation, joy before the angels of God. The point is that it works. And then the film ends with the premiere. Alex has had this severe trauma, and now he is no longer quote-unquote cured.
Right.
And the premier makes a deal with Alex that will involve Alex being heavily compensated to assist him in keeping his position in government under the threat of great violence.
Yeah.
Right? The state has one tool, and it's violence.
Yeah.
And all this, to tie back to, I teased early on a great Murray Rothbard quote. Murray Rothbard, really the founder of anarcho-capitalism, said, no action can be virtuous unless it is freely chosen. There was no virtue in Alex's avoidance of criminality after his processing.
Right.
In fact,
he saw it as an easy out.
He saw it as an easy out, but he's in a prison of a new kind. Even when you have a woman practically nude walking up to him, implied consent, he's physically ill at the idea of being intimate with her.
Right.
Right? He's no longer a human.
This movie, man.
So, back to this movie, man.
Let's sum it up.
So that's the major minor themes.
Yeah. And I have a feeling we'll probably talk about this movie again when we do the next Kubrick film.
Yeah, it'll circle back, I'm sure.
This won't be the last time we talk about A Clockwork Orange. But
would you recommend this movie to anybody?
Absolutely not.
Me either. That first 15 minutes is too hard to get through.
You and I had a really good conversation.
Absolutely.
Like, I really enjoyed this episode of just the topics we talked about. Like, there's some challenging points in it. I think as a piece of art, there's some really good things in it that are worth talking about.
Yeah. And those things don't resonate as well without that grotesque 15 minutes.
Right. So I just don't think this movie is the only way to get those points across.
Absolutely.
And for someone who I don't like, me personally, as a 33-year-old male, I don't like seeing some of that content.
Yeah.
Because of the images it puts in my mind and the images that I continue to have stuck in my mind. It
haunts.
It does. And I don't like that. I can't watch Game of Thrones because of that. Like,
yeah, I don't watch Game of Thrones for the same reason.
And this is not a slam on anyone who does. I know many people.
People have different tolerances.
Right, and I respect it, and I get that. I know I would like Game of Thrones except for the sexual explicitness. Like, I know I would love the storyline. I just can't live with those images in my head.
Yeah.
So
would you?
I think I think the message in this story is vital. I think it could have been done a different way. Same with the book. I think
the author agrees.
The author agrees. Like, well, he doesn't regret the book. He regrets the way the book was interpreted. In that quote, he's like, it haunts him because of the way people saw it as just. Let me go back to it.
Yeah.
Just let me get it.
We can edit. Don't worry. Don't rush.
The last chapter. No, not that line. The film made it easy for readers of the book to misunderstand what it was about, and misunderstanding will pursue me until I die. So it was he doesn't regret his writing.
Sure. Well, and
but he regrets the way he probably regrets everything post-publishing, like the way the publishers manipulated America, and then now when an American director took the published version rather than the original redemptive ending.
Sure.
So.
Now, I will say,
there's
though,
stuff to take away from it.
I will say
sure.
that my own experience watching it twice very much resonates with his comment about misunderstanding the purpose. Because the movie, the first time through, it does seem to glorify violence and rape and all kinds of degeneracy. Yeah. And the second time through, again, I was looking for it.
Right.
But I found all kinds of absolute moral truths about the way the world is and the way the world should be, and or at least what I believe to be absolute truths.
Yeah.
Final question.
Yeah.
Before we wrap up, would you put this in your top 250?
No, I would not. I don't regret watching it. I probably will never watch it again.
Yeah.
But it would not be in my top 250.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not recommending this to anybody. I'm not watching it again.
I think there's many other movies out there that would spark the same conversation we had today. Maybe like not all in one project.
Sure.
but I think the message that it was conveying could come in different forms, and I don't think it's one that I seem vital for people to watch before they continue on with their life.
Right.
I appreciate it for what it is, but I did not like it.
I didn't like it. I wouldn't recommend it. Not my top 250.
And I would definitely say if anyone out there has not seen it and is interested in watching it, that use your own discretion. But I would definitely say this is 18 or older, and make sure you can handle some of these mature themes, because it's also filmed in a very dark.
Gritty.
It just feels dark too. Like the whole movie's vibe is dark. It starts out dark. You start out just panning out from these guys in a milk bar, it just starts out dark. The soundtrack's dark. It's eerie. Like it's not a horror film. It's not scary in the sense of like it's a Halloween slasher.
I would say it's a horrific film.
Horrific, yes, but like it's more of it is more of just a satirical comedy film. Because like I think it'd
very
be
dark comedy.
Comedy.
Yeah.
But I would not recommend it. I would say 18 or older, if not older, to watch it. It is not a family-friendly film. It is not a movie that's going to leave you happy at the end of finishing it. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're curious to hear what you guys think about it.
Please let us know what you think.
You can find us at Facebook and Instagram /Silver Screen Biases.
Absolutely.
And Twitter /Screen Biases. We'll be active there. We want to hear what you guys have to say. We'll be interacting with you and fleshing those ideas out there. Next time we sit down, Jeff, what are we talking about?
Oh my goodness. It's a movie neither of you have I haven't seen yet.
I hadn't seen it before.
Are we saying the title?
Yeah, we're saying the title. Okay.
Alien.
Yeah.
Alien. We're keeping with our Halloween scary month movie and theme.
Or upsetting.
Yeah. So we're watching Alien. And I'm looking forward to this. I was looking forward to A Clockwork Orange.
Yeah.
I regret it. But I'm also looking forward to Alien just because it's another movie I've heard people talk about that I've never seen.
My dad was a teenager when Alien came out.
Okay.
So I texted him last night. I was like, hey, did you see Alien when it came out? He's like, nope, too scary.
So I am excited to watch, and it's a movie that's still relevant because like here in 2022 they just did the Prey Hulu movie, which is in the universe of Alien versus Predator, all these things. So like it's still a relevant series.
Yeah, Alien
So
and
I'm
Aliens
excited.
are in the top 250.
Correct.
That's the only two from the entire.
None of the Predators or
Nope.
any of those are in. Okay.
No.
I'd be curious if the new Prey is because the Prey got huge reviews.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see. I think
Right.
I think what we'll do
When we freeze the
at
list.
the end of every we have the lists frozen. I think at the end of every year we'll do how has the list changed
Yeah,
this
I
year.
think that's fair. Yeah, but I'm excited for it. We hope you guys are enjoying it. Thank you so much for listening. And yeah, continue this conversation. And yeah,
And if you want to support the show, we have buymeacoffee.com/screenbiases. You should be able to find links in the show notes. Thanks.
until next time,
Until next time.
have a good one. Thanks for listening. We had a great time putting this together for you.
To join the conversation, find us on Facebook and Instagram at Silver Screen Biases.
And on Twitter at Screen Biases.
We believe in value for value, so if you found value in our show, we ask you to consider supporting us.
Links to our social media and support can be found in the show notes.